material gain for themselves, their kin, and their tribe. By this measure alone, the diversity of species is one of Earth's most important resources. Then he goes on to argue, and then he goes on to cite all these just practical, right? And then we're way, way far away from philosophy when you start reading stuff like that. I bet you'd read this, I believe, because, it's easy. Oh, he's going to talk about the benefits of palm stuff or whatever, these bizarre plants that feed 1 million people. And we don't have to worry about philosophy for a while, right? For 3 or 4 pages, he just goes on about stuff like that. But he also points out that, not only are there tangible fuel, right? He talks about fuel benefits. I wonder if that's on the next slide. Yeah, down there. Anyway. But there are also all these unknown benefits in every species. And you've all heard this before, this claim. Every species is like a library of unread books. And until we preserve and protect and study that species, we will not know what is in that library. We just won't know because we will have destroyed the species and so burned up the library without even reading the books that are in it, which is ridiculous. Nobody should do that. He goes even farther though, and he says, look, it's really more analogous to a library, and this is where he gets, in my view, a little bit. This is written in the early 80s when many scientists are very, very, very enthusiastic about genetic engineering, right? So he says not only is it a library, but it's actually a library of unexamined loose-leaf notebooks, because once we start pulling the genes apart, we might figure out that we can combine genes from different species and then create these superorganisms or whatever that are going to feed 1 million people, right? And we don't know any of that stuff, and we'll never know if we let these species go extinct. So these are all more powerful reasons for conserving biodiversity, okay? Agricultural, pharmaceutical, industrial, fuel benefits for humans, but also these other scientific benefits. Okay, he's a big, in this book, clearly, he's a big proponent of genetically modified organisms and that whole technology. All right. My dad's really opposed to GMO food. My dad got really strict about his diet about 10 years ago. Decided to become a vegan. He's always been really against genetically engineering. He's a scientist. He and my brother argue a lot, and my sister too. My brother's a scientist too. My brother's actually a molecular biologist, so my brother, in a way, has more actual expertise, where my dad was mostly a physicist and an engineer. I mean, he still is. He's retired now, but anyway. But my brother and my dad argue about this stuff. My brother doesn't seem to have any strong objections to genetic modification. My dad has some very strong objections, and so it's a source of some strife in my family. I generally side with my dad on most issues. Anyway, he's kind of a socialist too. My dad's kind of a surprising guy once you get to know him. Anyway, all right. So that's it with that page of notes. Let's see, I don't need to save any time, do I? Because we already went over the midterm, so we have plenty of time. So this is a duplicate slide, isn't it? Or was I going in the wrong direction? All right. Biophilic conservationism, defined for you. Biology and ecology teach us that total freedom with respect to land, air, water, wildlife is not compatible with long-term human survival and flourishing. The sciences of biology and ecology teach us that human society needs to adopt new moral norms governing our relationship with land, air, water, and wildlife. The biophilic conservationist bridge between, okay, I'm going to characterize for you here. This is how they bridge the gap between a true empirical statement and then a true moral norm. Right? These are very different kinds of statements, right? It's a real kind of basic lesson you learn in any ethics class. Learn to differentiate. It's obvious now, you do it already just routinely after 2 weeks of class. But always differentiate between empirical statements and normative statements. And ethicists want to know how, as post-Enlightenment thinkers, we are obligated to demonstrate to anybody who's interested how we propose to negotiate the gap between empirical statements and normative statements. And the good Enlightenment thinkers, like conservationists, like E.O. Wilson, are going to offer one possible bridge, right? This is the bridge that they offer, okay? The empirical statement is that destruction of biodiversity is incompatible with long-term survival and flourishing of human communities. All right? The normative statement, destruction of biodiversity is morally wrong. Okay? Why is it morally wrong? For straight up, plain old consequentialist reasons. Right? The consequences are bad. It's bad for the world, let alone humanity. Right? It's certainly clearly bad for humanity, and that's all the more we need to say. And because it's bad for the future of human communities, it's morally wrong to destroy biodiversity. Okay, right? Kind of a no-brainer, but we want to spell it out carefully, how we bridge that gap. Because that's how we construct our ethic. Why should humans sacrifice some liberties in order to preserve other species? And this is really, you encounter the same argument from Leopold, from all these conservationists, all the post-Pinchot conservationists. Humans should preserve other species, as many as possible, including economically valueless species, because preserving other species is in our long-term self-interest. This is Wilson's surface conservation ethic. Other species offer enormous potential benefits to us. Okay, boom. So we should save them. And we don't know what half of those benefits are, so we should save them. Okay? So stewardship of biodiversity is necessary for human survival and flourishing. Noah's Ark. We need to be good stewards of biodiversity. We need to build a new ark. And that's kind of what his proposal is. He's proposed a new Noah's Ark. 40% of the earth, not set aside, but accommodated for wildlife. And all kinds of connecting, right? He's got a whole plan. There have to be these connections between areas dedicated to wildlife. Because a lot of these animals, like bears, and a lot of these animals need large areas. They move across the land. You know, they move a great distance. And so they need to have access and not have these roads and stuff blocking their way. And it's possible, it can be done, but obviously it's going to take a huge amount of political will. And he's probably, you know, it's kind of a pipe dream, but maybe not. I mean, it's necessary, really. How can it's kind of sad when you think that, well, something that's necessary for human long-term survival is kind of a pipe dream. Anyway, all right. So he also offers a deeper, right? He offers a surface conservation ethic, and then he points toward how he thinks it's really a deeper ethic too, because he also is saying that humans should preserve other species because other species are the matrix in which the human mind. He says that specifically, right? It's a very direct reference to what he thinks is endangered by the loss of biodiversity. And you might think, well, how can that be, man? No, let's just keep the air relatively clean and we'll be all right. You know, keep some healthy food and some water, you know. We don't need all these other animals. They're just taking up more space anyway, you know. So, but he's saying, look, man, we're going to lose what's distinctively human about us. That's what we're losing. We're losing our minds. Okay? That's what he's saying, literally. These other species, biodiversity, and the land, air, water ecosystems that support them are the matrix in which the human mind originated and is permanently rooted. And they offer the challenge and freedom innately sought. This is Wilson's deep conservation ethic. All right, so this is very powerful, obviously. I mean, Wilson is going to be, I arranged these, and there I have them arranged, anyway. Well, let me see here. I shortened them down, though. Anyway, I might need to. Yeah, all right. Well, this is how I have them identified in the questions, too. And there, as you can see, there are 5, but maybe there are really only 3. But there's the wise users, and they're going to have their showdown over the Snake River dams and the Snake River salmon. And they're going to have their showdown with the GBCs, right? And then anyway, that's what's going to happen for over the weekend for you guys. You're going to eat. All right, so Wilson thinks that this is just a really important contribution to, you know, now it's, what, 30 years old. This was published in 1983. And we haven't made very much movement at all. We've gone in the other direction, probably. We've regressed in terms of protecting biodiversity. Wilson's deep conservation ethic. He says that it is time to invent moral reasoning of a new and more powerful kind, to look to the very roots of motivation and understand why we cherish and protect life. The elements from which a deep conservation ethic might be constructed include the impulses and biased forms of learning, loosely classified as biophilia. Interesting how he calls them biased forms of learning. I think, he's saying something as innocent and harmless as just many biologists, especially biologists who study creatures, actual wild creatures, they're biased because they're drawn towards studying them by their love and admiration. So naturally they're going to, right? Their knowledge acquisition is colored at every stage by their love for what they're studying. So that makes perhaps biophilic learning is biased in the sense of, right? Does that mean it's not Baconian anymore? It's not objective enough anymore? I don't know. Perhaps we could read some of these 20th century ecologists, and Wilson himself perhaps, as proposing a non-Baconian form of doing science. Science as the lover of what the scientist studies, rather than science as a conqueror. All right. The elements from which a deep conservation ethic might be constructed include the impulses and biased forms of learning loosely classified as biophilia, ranging from awe of the serpent to the idealization of the savannah and the hunter's mystique. They are the poles toward which the developing mind most comfortably moves. And as the mind moves, it grows into a form true to its long, unique evolutionary history. He says something really deep, isn't he? And he doesn't really quite nail it down for us. But he's using a lot of artful language. We might call a lot of this is polemic, really. It's polemics. But he's hinting at this really deep, he's referencing something mysterious. As the mind moves, it grows into a form true to its long, unique evolutionary history. The more the mind is fathomed in its own right as an organ of survival, the greater will be the reverence for life for purely rational reasons. There's that phrase again, reverence for life. Wow. I didn't notice that before. But that is in E.O. Wilson's chapter that I asked you to read. Right? The greater will be the reverence for life for purely rational reasons. I suspect Professor Wilson read Albert Schweitzer. I don't think this is an unconscious this is a deliberate reference to Albert Schweitzer. And it's really so reminiscent of Albert Schweitzer, isn't it? Why, in what sense, does an evolutionary understanding of the human mind lead to a greater reverence for all other species and for land, air, water, wildlife, ecosystems, Earth? Right? It seems like a strange argument, especially given Wilson's insistence that the mind is purely an organ of survival. How could biophilic impulses, love and concern for other life forms originate in the evolution of an organ whose primary purpose is to enable human survival? It's really a puzzle. Wilson seems to be saying that the human mind flourishes and is most comfortable within the natural context in which it evolved. All right. Biophilic conservationism is still essentially an anthropocentric, selfish ethic, but he claims that this is duplicative, isn't it? Yes, the rest of it is. All right, and this is an important point, though, to conclude this part of our lesson with. Land, air, water, wildlife, ecosystems, and Earth do not have rights, okay, under Wilson's theory. They do not, and they don't have any direct independent moral status either. They are valuable only for prudential reasons because humans need them to survive and flourish, and not for moral reasons, okay? So that might seem like I'm being kind of harsh on Wilson, but I don't think I am. This is what he's arguing. Without any kind of reservation. He doesn't identify, he doesn't have the reservations. He doesn't have the kind of misgivings that I have. Maybe because he's just not interested in going beyond an anthropocentric defense of protecting biodiversity. But it does make you wonder, it just does make you wonder about the philosophical, what's going on with this biophilia hypothesis? Do we really love biodiversity if it's in long-term human interest to destroy it? If it's in long-term human interest for whatever reason to destroy biodiversity, then Doesn't that mean we should do that? And yet he's saying, no, we're biophiles too. And because we're biophiles, we should not do that. I guess that's what he's saying. Because we're biophiles, we need those natural landscapes. And so that's why we should save those natural landscapes, even though developing them might produce better consequences for more people. So anyway, these are the kinds of things that you have to wrestle with when you think about this very tantalizing and enigmatic hypothesis. And what does it add to these anthropocentric environmental ethics? All right. So, does anyone have any questions? No? Yes?
Midterm, do you want us to have it like all on one page per se, but just like post the question and then...
You're James, right?
Yep.
Okay. It would be cool to just organize your midterm into 5 separate essays.
Cool.
And I would invite you, if you want, to write, especially that first question, maybe only the first question, this one, in the form of a letter to, I actually had her name up there because I was gonna say, should Superintendent Phyllis Green is her name, introduce new wolves or recommend the introduction of, but you could write a letter. You could say, dear Superintendent Green, I'm writing because of my concern about the wolves on Isle Royal, and this is what I think Aldo Leopold would do. Anyway, it's just an idea if you want to do it that way. All right, but I would organize your midterm response into 5 separate essays. All right.
Good.
Does anyone else have any questions about anything? Anything at all? All right. So how are we doing? Are we getting some work done? Do you feel like we've made progress? Yeah? We've learned things? Yeah? That's important, isn't it? Obviously. If you're not learning anything because it's all going way over your head or something, then I would be concerned. I mean, I would be concerned. I am concerned if that's happening. And I want you to talk to me and visit me in my office. But hopefully by keeping this class close to the applied ethic, we're just going to ride along that same track all term long. With applied ethics, we're going to build on the theoretical knowledge we've developed so far, and then we're going to keep applying our theories to moral struggles. And that, I think, makes the class accessible, and it makes it clear what's expected of you. And you start to get an idea of how to do ethics by applying ethics to moral struggles in natural resource management. That's the plan for the term anyway. So let's watch a little bit about, let's watch a little more about Uncle Aldo if I can find it in my... I think I labeled it. No, it's not there. This guy named Lauren Green narrates this Leopold documentary. Maybe that's it. Yeah, that must be it. Is that recent? Yeah, that's only 8 days ago. All right. So we'll watch part of this.
In his own way, Leopold would transform the old nature study, the endless classifying of organisms, into the study of the dynamic relationships between plants, animals, soil, water, and perhaps most importantly, man. Born in 1887,